guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing a one-take style video on this gorgeous C63 Coupe Black Series. This actually belongs to my good friend Tim, aka Shmee150. We're in the middle of a AMG Black Series tour around Germany, and I'm actually about 5 miles away from the Nürburgring at the moment. He threw me the keys to this for an hour and I thought, well, let's shoot some content because it's an epic car. This era of the C63 was my absolute favourite. At the time you could buy a coupe similar to this, a 4-door saloon, and then later on you could buy the 507 edition, but this black edition was the absolute top notch. They only produced about 700 of these globally, and I believe about 70 right-hand drive versions made it to the UK, and half of those had the aero pack, which this particular car has. You can tell that by the canards around the front and, well, the giant wing around the back. I personally prefer the non-aero cars, although today I had this up to 290 kilometers an hour, which is 180 miles an hour, just shy of this car's top speed, and it was massively planted on the Autobahn. So I can basically vouch for the fact that this aero works very well. It felt amazing at those speeds. Under the bonnet, it retains the hand-built 6.2 litre V8, codenamed the M156. In the regular car, or the regular C63, if you can call that regular, produced about 450 horsepower. In this one, just over 500. I've been looking online and there's various figures ranging from about 507 up to about 520. It feels closer to the 520 figure in this one, if not a bit more. This car's basically stock, but it has been decatted, so it's even louder than a regular C63 Black Series, which is just epic and is really part of the experience when you're driving this car. That engine is paired up to a 7-speed automatic gearbox. Obviously you have paddles on the wheel, and all of that power and torque, 620 Newton meters, goes through the rear axle. When this was produced back in 2012 and 2013, it would set you back about £100,000, depending on options and aero kits. Today, an example like this is going to cost you about £150,000, and I can only see that going one way. It's a dying breed, and with such low numbers, wow, it's a special car. Let's get in and take it for a drive before we run out of time. Now we're out of town. I mean, what a sound. It's intoxicating. And before driving this car, I was worried that, like so many AMGs, the engine is the be-all and end-all of the car. But after spending a couple of days in it now, and doing about 500 miles in this, which is just amazing, and very grateful for that, so thank you very much, Tim. I feel like I know it very well. And I can report that it's not just the mighty 6.2 litre V8. There's a lot more to this car than that incredible engine. Now, before we delve into the multiple positive points about this car, I do want to point out the couple of negatives that I've found in the time that I've been in this car. One of them, you might have guessed it, is the driving position. The W204, this chassis, this particular C-Class, if you like, never had the best driving position, especially for the taller chap, and I do feel a little bit cramped and sort of hunched over in here, and if I was to put a helmet on, well, I wouldn't fit particularly well. It's not tragic, it's just not great, but that's what you expect from a car that's almost 10 years old. There wasn't many cars back then that suited someone of my height. The next slight negative is the seats themselves. They're not bad, but I've found them to be quite uncomfortable over today's journey. We've been in the car about 7 or 8 hours, and I guess that's not bad for a seat, but again, by today's modern standards, some of the seats, like the ones in my M3 competition, well, they blow these out of the water in terms of comfort, but they're not bad and they support you reasonably well. The last slight negative for me, aside from its thirst, which you're going to expect, so I'm not going to include that as a negative, but my last slight negative would be the interior fit and finish, but it's actually not too bad. It's a lot better than modern day Mercedes or AMG products, in my opinion. There's a lot of V-class buttons and indicator stalks and stuff in here, but that's not a bad thing. Everything seems to have stood well over time, and everything seems to work really well, so I'm not complaining about that. And let's face it, just like all focused sports cars, this isn't about interior quality or fit and finish. It's about how it goes and how it sounds and the feelings that it gives you. And those feelings are very, very good. What a car. We'll just slow down to this 70 zone. Oh yes, any excuse to change down. And again, what an engine, what a sound. Something that I thought would be a real weak point on this car is the gearbox, because this sort of era of Mercedes, even their AMG products, some of their gearboxes really let them down. But I have to say, this 7-speed is a lot better than I thought it would be. It's not the most responsive box in the world, especially by today's standards, but it's pretty good, and the ratios, although quite long, they seem to suit this car very well. And the flip side of this car, and perhaps its biggest trick up its sleeve, is how good it is as a GT car. Today, sitting on the Autobahn, just munching up miles, you put it over into comfort, using this drive mode down there, and it actually goes quite quiet, and it sits at about 1700 RPM at 75, 80 miles an hour, so actually doesn't use too much fuel at that pace and becomes a really good sort of long distance cruiser. But as you can probably see on this rather choppy bit of tarmac, very similar to a typical British A or B road, the ride quality is quite firm, even in its softer setting. I believe this car has a 6-way adaptive suspension system, and when you cycle from comfort into Sport Plus, you can certainly notice the difference between those two modes. And it's not horrific in comfort, but I'll hold my judgment until I drive one of these back in the UK one day on our roads. I've switched it back over into manual and we're leaving a town behind us. Put your foot down. The throttle response and engine response is like nothing I've ever felt before. Well, in fact, actually, Tim's SLS Black Series feels even better, and that's essentially the same engine that's tuned up a bit higher, but it's about as good as you've ever felt. And it's not just the throttle response, the brakes feel really good. Again, on a car that's close to 10 years old, it stops as good as any car I've ever driven. This is on Michelin's Pilot Super Sports, which were a brand new tyre, state-of-the-art, back in 2012, 2013. It's the same tyre that came on the original M135i, and it seems to suit this car really well. I mean, I haven't pushed it hard, but when you push it through the turns, obviously you've got a hydraulic steering rack, so there's loads of feel. It's quite heavy. It's hard not to get carried away from just talking about that engine all the time while I'm doing this video on a one-take style, but there is so much more to this car. Like I said, the way it handles, the first sort of 10-20 minutes behind the wheel, well, it feels very pointy, especially in town, and that's because there is so much negative camber on the front axle, because this car is a really focused AMG. Most AMGs are all about their engine and more of a usable sports car compared to, say, an M car that is a bit more of a car that you'd take on a track day. But this, well, this was designed for track use and every use, and it really does feel far more focused than a regular W204 C63. Great thing about this car is that it's really usable, it's really comfortable, it's got a big boot, it's got 4 usable seats in here, cabin space isn't bad. I mean, if you shut everything down like we did earlier on, it goes into auto and it shifts into 6th or 7th gear, it actually becomes almost like a normal C-Class, which is really, really cool if you are using this car as your daily. But I guess with values going through the roof, and there's probably only 40 right-hand drive UK cars left at the moment, not many people are going to use them as dailies, and that's what makes this particular car so special. It's one of Tim's, and Tim uses all of his cars, and by the end of this trip we would have done 2,000 odd miles, and God knows what that would cost in depreciation. But really, in his words, who cares? You know, these cars are to be used, and letting me get behind the wheel of it, Ben, Gotam, everyone that's on this trip, it's just been awesome. And experiencing a car like this, a real pin-up car for me, something that I've dreamt of dreaming. I've seen a few around London over the years and just absolutely loved it, but really did think that it was a sort of never meet your heroes car, and I thought that when I get behind the wheel of it, I would be disappointed by it being a one-trick pony, it being that engine and nothing else. But honestly, I couldn't have been more wrong. Aside from the slightly odd driving position that you could fix if this was your car, I'm sure, by putting buckets in it or whatever, it's just a brilliant all-round car, and I'm really gonna miss this. I guess you could compare this car to the iconic E46 M3 CSL. This is almost like AMG's CSL. The M3, well, that was out nearly 20 years ago, and this nearly 10 years ago, so it has moved the game on a long way since then, in terms of gearbox, in terms of power, in terms of the way it puts the power down, in terms of the way it stops and handles. But it shares lots of similar feelings to the E46 M3 CSL, and I was thinking about that earlier on. I've never felt so engaged with a car since I drove that E46. It has that special feeling, which again is very rare for an AMG. They're great cars, don't get me wrong, but they never have that precision and real feeling of a car. You know, the driving dynamics are just spot on in this car. They really are, really, really spot on. If I had 150, 160,000 pounds to spend on a car that was going to appreciate, this would be very high up on my list. And in fact, I can't really think of anything else that's going to give you more in terms of drama, driving dynamics, practicalities. It's brilliant. It doesn't have the biggest fuel tank in the world, maybe 60 odd litres, but like I talked about earlier on, if you don't boot it everywhere, and on the motorway 7th is nice and long, you actually get a decent range. I'd say about 350 miles if you take it relatively easy, which is better than the majority of EVs out there, and it only takes 3 or 4 minutes to get that 350 miles back again. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm gonna have to get this car back to Tim now. I think we're actually gonna go and do some laps on the Nürburgring itself in this car and his other Black Series cars. Massive thanks to Tim for trusting me with this car and letting me shoot this video. It's been really epic spending some time behind the wheel. It really has. I've really enjoyed every moment of it, whether I was on the Autobahn doing 290 kilometers an hour, or just cruising around town, or taking it along a beautiful road like this. Talking of performance figures quickly, Mercedes claim this will do the 0 to 62 sprint in 4.2 seconds and has a top speed of 186 miles an hour. I can tell you now that the 186 miles an hour is probably conservative, even with the massive wing on the back, because I touched 180 today with 2 people and loads of luggage, and it was accelerating hard at that point. I had to slow down because someone pulled out. And in terms of acceleration, well, It feels quicker than that, a lot quicker than that, but due to the slightly laggy and slowish gearbox, that's probably where it's losing all its time. Also, just trying to get all of that torque and power down on the ground is quite difficult on slightly older rubber. They're not the widest rear tyres, I think they're about 275 sections, so if you put bigger tyres on there with more modern rubber, I'm sure it could do it in well under 4 seconds. Guys, thanks a lot for watching. As always, I will see you at another video very, very soon. Cheers.